A faint shimmer on the horizon, then silence, until the ground trembles. At 4:27 a.m., radar operators near Belgorod reported an unidentified blip skimming treetop level, moving too fast and too low for a cruise missile. Seconds later, a Ukrainian MiG-29, reborn through a Frankenstein blend of Soviet metal and Western circuitry, launched a pair of French AASM Hammer precision bombs. Its target, a Russian FSB logistics and drone coordination hub believed to control reconnaissance feeds over Kharkiv's northern corridor. The raid, one of the most daring in 2025, was over in less than 8 minutes. But its implications rippled through Moscow, NATO command, and the defense industry alike. Why was this strike different? Because it marked a turning point, not in territorial gains, but in how wars are fought. Ukrainian engineers had fused Western avionics onto legacy airframes, creating a hybrid beast, the MiG-29 Ghost mod. This wasn't stealth by design, it was stealth by improvisation. According to Defense News and Jane's Defense Weekly, the upgrades allowed outdated jets to deploy smart Western munitions without full system integration, an engineering miracle under wartime constraints. The mission planners took advantage of the Earth's curvature, hugging the terrain at just 30 meters altitude to stay below radar horizon. Russian S-400 batteries, optimized for high-altitude threats, struggled to maintain track. NATO observers noted how the Ukrainian Air Force applied terrain-following logic, similar to that of US F-111 missions in the Cold War. The strategy was simple but deadly effective. Fly low, fly fast, and strike before the enemy can look up. Recent intelligence leaks shared by Reuters suggest that Kyiv's command deliberately scheduled the operation between Russian radar maintenance cycles. When one grid sector temporarily handed off coverage to another, that timing opened a fleeting 90-second gap, barely enough for the MiG to dart through, pop up, release, and dive away. The real story here is not about an explosion, it's about evolution. A legacy fighter conceived in the Soviet era, now weaponized with NATO-grade navigation and targeting algorithms. Each sortie teaches Ukraine how to fight smarter, not harder, relying on precision, data fusion, and electronic deception instead of brute force. Pentagon analysts now wonder aloud, if a MiG-29 can carry AASM bombs today, what happens when F-16, recently confirmed for deployment to eastern bases, enter the fray with full Western munition suites? As one US Air Force strategist told The Guardian, Ukraine isn't just adapting, it's accelerating the convergence of two military ecosystems that were never meant to coexist. Could this fusion of East and West technology redefine aerial warfare for decades to come? And how will Russia counter a threat that's both familiar and alien at the same time? The raid's success wasn't luck, it was physics. Every meter of altitude, every second of timing was calculated with surgical precision. The MiG-29 Ghost mod left its airbase in Poltava under radio silence, its flight path preloaded through a terrain-following algorithm patched from Western open-source avionics code. That path exploited Russia's biggest defensive blind spot, the radar horizon. Flying just 30 meters above ground, radar beams overshoot the target, unable to detect low-flying aircraft beyond 25 kilometers. By the time the jet reached the border, Russian radar operators near Kursk were facing what BBC defense correspondent Jonathan Beale later described as a math problem they couldn't solve in time. The radar's curvature left a coverage gap, a tactical loophole Ukraine had weaponized since mid-2024. Once inside Russian airspace, the MiG began a slow climb to 5,000 meters, preparing for what pilots call the pop-up toss. That maneuver, straight from NATO's Cold War playbook, lets a pilot lob precision bombs while minimizing exposure to anti-air defenses. But this wasn't the 1980s anymore. Russian air defenses now boasted S-400s, with engagement envelopes stretching beyond 250 kilometers. The Ukrainian planners countered with algorithmic deception. A second MiG-29, flying 40 kilometers south, transmitted false radar echoes mimicking a low-flying decoy. When Russian batteries lit up, they locked onto the ghost signal instead. Western analysts interviewed by Defense News noted that this kind of deception reflects a digital adaptation trend in modern warfare. Instead of jamming signals, Ukrainian crews use them, manipulating Russian targeting AI into tracking ghosts. The British Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, called it the evolution of counter-detection, making the enemy see exactly what you want them to. The most striking aspect of this operation, however, was its timing. Reuters confirmed that the MiG's ascent coincided with a Russian satellite overpass gap, a brief window when optical surveillance was blinded by orbital shadow. That single 38-second margin turned an impossible mission into a clean strike. At 4:29:31 a.m., the aircraft's sensors aligned, and both AASM bombs detached in perfect symmetry. They began their glide path, autonomous, quiet, unstoppable. The MiG then dove back toward treeline, disappearing from radar like a ghost slipping into fog. It was here that the Russians realized the deception too late. Dozens of S-400 missiles fired, filling the sky with contrails, but none found their mark. As one NATO analyst later wrote in Jane's, Ukraine didn't defeat Russia's air defenses. It outthought them. This wasn't merely a skirmish, it was an algorithmic duel. The success of the MiG wasn't about the aircraft itself, but about how software, sensors, and timing now dictate the outcome of combat. Could this be the dawn of code warfare, where a few lines of software weigh more than tons of steel and fuel? And how will this reshape NATO's view of low-cost hybrid fleets in future proxy wars? At 5,000 meters, the MiG-29 Ghost mod entered the most dangerous phase of its mission, the pop-up into the kill zone. From this altitude, every second mattered. Russian radars instantly detected the sudden climb, and within moments, fire control systems from 2 S-400 batteries began to calculate intercept trajectories. But the Ukrainian pilot, trained under NATO simulation programs in Poland, had one advantage. He knew the enemy's math before they finished solving it. The maneuver that followed was pure tactical theater. As the jet crested at a steep 45-degree angle, the pilot triggered the toss sequence. Both AASM hammer bombs released in a precision arc, their onboard INS/GPS units automatically adjusting for wind speed and curvature. Within 2 seconds, the MiG banked sharply downward, engines at full afterburner diving back to treetop altitude. The aircraft vanished from Russian radar again before the first missile left its launcher. The key isn't invisibility, it's predictability, explained a NATO air defense consultant to The Guardian. The MiG exploited Russia's expectation that every climb equals a strike. It made itself visible for exactly as long as needed to deliver payloads, then disappeared before engagement parameters completed. On the ground, Russian S-400 crews unleashed a storm of 48 N-6DM missiles. Each warhead closed in at Mach 8, their flight paths curving across the pre-dawn sky. Yet none found their target. The AASM bombs, being far smaller than aircraft, simply didn't reflect enough radar energy to trigger proper locks. As Jane's Defense Weekly reported, the S-400 is optimized for planes, not gliding munitions. Meanwhile, the MiG, already speeding back at near Mach 0.9, engaged its Western-supplied defensive suite, an adaptation of France's Spectra ECM system. The sensors automatically released chaff bursts at calculated intervals, tricking tracking radars into seeing phantom targets. One U.S. Air Force colonel described it as a ballet between algorithms, with human reflexes reduced to milliseconds. The precision of this sequence highlighted a shift in combat philosophy. Rather than overwhelming defenses with mass launches, Ukraine had evolved toward rhythmic warfare. Brief, synchronized engagements designed to compress the opponent's reaction time below human comprehension. It's no longer about dominance, said German analyst Marcus Kelling of the DW Defense Forum. It's about tempo. Who can rewrite the rhythm of war? By 4:31 a.m., the MiG was back in Ukrainian airspace. Low, fast, undetectable. Its onboard telemetry confirmed 2 successful weapon releases and an intact return vector. The pilot's biometric sensors, according to leaked mission data, recorded a heart rate below 100, a mark of near-perfect discipline under fire. That one act of precision, 2 bombs, 1 minute, 0 losses, resonated across the global military landscape. Pentagon sources confirmed to Reuters that NATO immediately incorporated the data into joint air combat simulations. Analysts now describe the mission as a bridge between generations, the moment when analog hardware met digital warfare and tactics became software. Could this indicate that future wars will be fought not by the most expensive jets, but by the smartest algorithms controlling the cheapest platforms? And what happens when AI learns to fly these patterns faster than any human can? The bombs fell silent through the clouds, invisible to radar, unstoppable to interceptors. Each AASM hammer carried its own miniature brain, a hybrid of inertial guidance and GPS correction systems. Developed by France's Safran Group, the AASM was built to turn standard unguided munitions into precision strike weapons. Yet in Ukraine's hands, it became something far more advanced. A tool of asymmetric air dominance. Analysts from Defense News describe the AASM as a smart bomb that rewrites its own path mid-flight. Once released, the missile-sized bomb ignites a small rocket booster, pushing it to nearly Mach 1 before transitioning into a glide phase. Micro-actuated fins adjust constantly, calculating drift, pressure, and even thermal crosswinds, allowing accuracy within less than 1.5 meters at impact. But what made the Ukrainian strike extraordinary wasn't the weapon itself. It was the delivery system. The MiG-29 platform, never designed for NATO weapons, had been modified through open architecture avionics. According to Jane's Defense Weekly, Ukrainian engineers integrated modular interface converters that allowed Soviet pylons to speak NATO fire control language. It's like running iOS on a Soviet phone, one Western defense engineer joked. It shouldn't work, but it does, beautifully. The dual AASM deployment created a two-phase attack. The first bomb struck an FSB communications node, designed to sever command uplinks between drones and ground units. The second, delayed by 4 seconds, impacted the facility's reinforced warehouse, housing more than 80 Iranian-made Shahed components. Satellite imagery released later by BBC Verify confirmed that over 60% of the structure was obliterated, its thermal signature lingering for hours. This wasn't just a hit, it was a message. The precision demonstrated how hybrid warfare now merges NATO engineering with Ukrainian improvisation. French avionics, American reconnaissance data, and Soviet-era flight mechanics had combined to achieve what neither system could alone. A report from The Guardian noted that Western analysts were stunned by how effectively Ukraine had managed to synchronize disparate systems under real combat pressure. "This is plug-and-play warfare," said U.S. Air Force Colonel Peter Lanson. "The future of aerial combat isn't stealth, it's adaptability." Meanwhile, Russian military commentators struggled to respond. Pro-Kremlin outlets claimed that the bombs had missed their primary target, while independent analysts from DW countered with satellite-confirmed imagery proving multiple direct hits. What could not be denied, however, was the deeper psychological blow. Russia's vaunted integrated air defense network had failed to intercept subsonic, non-stealth munitions launched from a 40-year-old jet. The shockwaves extended far beyond Ukraine. In Tel Aviv, Israel's defense command began reassessing Iron Dome protocols against low-signature glide bombs. In Beijing, Chinese state analysts quietly studied the AASM's data profiles, predicting potential countermeasures. Even in Washington, under President Trump's new defense modernization directive, the Pentagon cited the Ukrainian strike as evidence of the new modular combat age. This leaves one critical question. When nations can retrofit yesterday's weapons with tomorrow's brains, does traditional air superiority even matter anymore? Or has technology officially overtaken firepower as the real king of war? The Russian counterstrike came fast and failed faster. Within 3 minutes of the explosions, S-400 batteries at Belgorod and Voronezh launched 12 interceptors in retaliation. Their targets? The 2 AASM bombs already descending and the MiG-29 Ghost mod racing home below radar range. But modern physics, not politics, decided the outcome. The 48 N6DM missiles, engineered to track high-speed aircraft at altitudes above 1,000 meters, were ill-suited for this battle geometry. They're overkill weapons against under-the-horizon targets, explained Dr. Michael O'Hanlon of the Brookings Institution in an interview with Reuters. The radar cross-section of a guided bomb is smaller than a seagull. By the time it's detected, it's already too late. As the missiles cut upward, the Ukrainian bombs plunged vertically, correcting their course through microfins. AASM's final phase, known as terminal dive, allowed them to exceed 70 degrees of descent, creating a near impossible tracking angle for radar systems. One Defense News simulation showed that to intercept such a trajectory, an S-400 missile would need to exceed its mechanical gimbal limits by 40%, a physical impossibility. Observers from NATO's Allied Air Command later described it as the moment when software outperformed hardware. The Russians had better missiles, but Ukraine had better math. The bombs hit almost simultaneously. The first penetrated the communications bunker, its 250-kilogram warhead detonating with pinpoint precision. The second plunged through reinforced concrete, creating a shockwave that destroyed subterranean fuel lines. A secondary blast ignited the base's electrical grid, sending plumes of smoke visible from 20 kilometers away. BBC News confirmed through independent satellite data that no civilian zones were affected, an unprecedented precision level for such a deep strike. The operation demonstrated the growing capability of Ukraine's hybrid fleet to conduct surgical bombing, a term once reserved for fifth-generation aircraft like the F-35. Back in Moscow, the Kremlin downplayed the event, calling it a minor security incident. But inside NATO headquarters, the tone was different. Analysts viewed the strike as a live-fire validation of an emerging doctrine, Distributed Precision Strike Operations, DPSO. Instead of relying on stealth aircraft, Ukraine achieved the same effect by networking cheap platforms with smart munitions. This philosophy now shapes military thinking from Brussels to Washington. President Trump's defense secretary publicly praised the mission, stating, "What Ukraine proved is that precision beats prestige." Under the Trump administration's renewed defense initiatives, similar modular upgrades are now being tested for U.S. allies in Eastern Europe. Russia, meanwhile, faces an uncomfortable reality. Its most sophisticated defense network, costing billions, was bypassed not by a stealth bomber, but by software innovation and timing. DW's defense columnist summarized it bluntly. The S-400's failure wasn't tactical. It was conceptual. It was designed to fight yesterday's war. The strategic consequence is profound. NATO now recognizes that adaptive, low-cost tactics can neutralize even the most advanced defense systems. And if Ukraine can do this with 1980s hardware, what happens when the US begins integrating similar modular AI systems into its next-gen F-16 fleets stationed in Poland? Can sheer speed and intelligence of code rewrite the balance of global air power? And if so, are we watching the sunset of traditional missile supremacy in real time? The twin explosions rolled across Belgorod's outskirts like thunder trapped underground. What followed wasn't just destruction, it was demonstration. As dawn rose, reconnaissance drones captured the aftermath. Two crater sites aligned with mathematical precision, the surrounding terrain untouched. Analysts from Al Jazeera and Reuters confirmed the strike had achieved what military theorists call total efficiency, maximum damage to a strategic asset with minimum collateral. Inside NATO's command circles, the implications were profound. A $40,000 retrofit on a decades-old MiG had successfully bypassed billions of dollars worth of Russian air defense. It wasn't just a victory for Ukraine, it was a paradigm shift for modern warfare. As Jane's Defense Weekly noted, this operation marks the arrival of a new combat philosophy, where data, timing, and software matter more than raw firepower. U.S. defense officials under President Trump immediately convened a closed-door review, reportedly integrating the Ghost Mod model into ongoing US-Polish joint air exercises. According to The Guardian, the Pentagon's Joint Artificial Intelligence Center is now studying the mission's telemetry to refine AI-assisted flight algorithms for NATO allies. Meanwhile, in Moscow, panic quietly replaced pride. Russian commanders scrambled to recalibrate radar frequencies and reposition S-400 units, attempting to counter what they termed low-altitude gliding munitions. Yet internal reports leaked to DW suggest that Russia's defense network remains riddled with blind zones, especially near border regions where radar overlap is incomplete. The symbolic damage was even greater. For the first time since the full-scale invasion, Ukraine had demonstrated the capacity to hit Russia's homeland with precision, not provocation. Western experts framed it not as escalation, but as evolution. This isn't offense, it's deterrence through innovation, said Air Marshal Gavin Steele, retired, in an interview with BBC World. Ukraine just proved that ingenuity can replace numerical superiority. Beyond the battlefield, the strike sent tremors through global defense markets. Stock values of European weapons manufacturers surged by 11%, while Russian arms exporters faced cancellations from several African buyers. Israel's Rafael Advanced Defense Systems even began discussions with NATO about countering hybrid glide weapons, a direct byproduct of this strike. But the true strategic ripple extended farther east. In Beijing, Chinese defense analysts reportedly simulated similar low observable strike patterns against Taiwan's radar grid, citing Ukraine's hybrid tactics as a case study in affordable asymmetry. And in Tehran, Iranian engineers began reprogramming Shahed drone guidance systems, fearful that the same tactics could soon render their technology obsolete. This is the future of warfare, no longer measured by tonnage, range, or speed, but by synchronization and adaptability. A new arms race has begun, not for bigger bombs, but for smarter brains behind them. As Defense News concluded, the next superpower won't be the one that builds the most weapons, it'll be the one that codes them best. The MiG-29 Ghost mod returned to its base at dawn, its fuselage scorched, its mission complete. There was no celebration, only silence. A quiet recognition that something had changed forever. And so the question remains, when legacy machines can outthink billion-dollar systems, what truly defines air superiority? The hardware or the mind behind the mission? The Ukrainian MiG-29 Ghost mod raid in early 2025 marked a technological watershed. Using terrain-hugging flight paths, algorithmic deception, and precision-guided AASM hammer bombs, Ukraine executed one of the most complex hybrid air operations in modern warfare. The mission proved that legacy Soviet jets retrofitted with Western avionics and smart munitions can outperform advanced air defense networks like Russia's S-400. The strike's success reshaped NATO's doctrine, validating distributed precision strike operations, the concept that low-cost networked platforms can achieve strategic impact once reserved for stealth aircraft. Experts from Defense News, Jane's, and BBC highlighted the operation as proof of a new paradigm. Software-centric warfare where timing, coding, and adaptability eclipse brute force. Under President Trump's administration, U.S. defense agencies began integrating similar modular upgrades into allied forces. Globally, militaries from Israel to China are now rethinking air defense, realizing that future wars will be fought not with the most expensive planes, but with the smartest systems guiding them. The question for the next decade is no longer who has more jets, but who can make theirs think